So many thanks for these comments. I have just a couple of questions for the panel here, and I would like to start with a warm-up question, and that is what we actually, you have to appreciate I come from the Faculty of Arts here. What do we really mean when we say the word science? Because there are science advisors, we're talking about science advice, and topical in Canada, we just have a motion on the table in the House of Commons to create a parliamentary science officer. It's always that word science. So what's included? Is it the natural sciences only, or do we include administrative sciences, cognitive science, social science, political science, and so forth? I think it's important that we just get it out of the way, but maybe briefly, if possible.
Well, there are different meanings. The Royal Society, its science tends to be on the physical and natural sciences. The British Academy tends to do cover more the arts and humanities and social sciences. But when in the British government we talk about the science ring fence, which is the budget for science, that includes the work of all 7 of our research councils, stretching from the Natural Environment Research Council and the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council through to the Social Sciences Research Council and the Arts and Humanities Research Council. So for the purposes of the science budget, it includes funding going via the Arts and Humanities Research Council to someone who's doing work on French existentialism or medieval music. And the interconnections between these different disciplines matter so much that I think it is good to think of the research base as covering all of them, and it relates to our public policy interest because often a lot of these issues end up involving human behaviour. And one of the things you notice is sometimes people in the physical sciences, they will design a new drug, and then the aid budget will deliver it to East Africa, and you'll discover in East Africa people think this is a Western plot to unman their tribal elders and nobody should take the drug. And suddenly, to get the actual human behaviour that you want the drug to be taken, you need anthropologists, you need people who understand the culture of the area, you need people who understand attitudes to the West in Africa. So very rarely is there a problem that can be solved simply through the lens of one discipline.
Please go ahead, yeah.
Well, I think I would certainly agree with that. I think that it does cover all the sciences and all of the different disciplines, and that's very clear in the UK. And I think it's also very clear that we all have to work together to engage with the public. The public doesn't see disciplines in little boxes the way we do in traditionally, if you like, in the universities. And so they don't distinguish between the social science and the actual discovery. And I think that getting researchers to work together more is one of the ways of overcoming these kind of issues and actually listening to the public, listening to people, trying to say what it is they are worried about and responding with the right kind of discipline so that people can understand more what is and what can and what can't be done, or what the risks are and what they aren't. So I would agree that I would have it cover all research councils.
So I think that I'm not sure I agree with the purpose of your question, because I think as a practicing chemist, I don't really differentiate between the people. They're either those who are doing research to find things out, or they're other people. And scientist is quite a modern term. It was only coined in, I think, 1832, the year my grandfather was born, at the British Association, when they suddenly decided they should have a term to describe people working in science, like they have artists to describe those working in arts. And there was a lot of argument. People said scientist was an ugly word and they didn't like it. So I think what the thing which is perhaps unfortunate about the word scientist and science is that sometimes it is taken divisively not to involve engineers or technologists. And in fact, with modern problems, one needs everybody. And even then we may not solve them. So we shouldn't be arguing about, are you a scientist or you are whatever, but we should get on and solve the problems.
Let's move to something more practical. One of the structures that Minister Willetts mentioned, the UK Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology Post, is a structure and its products that is in Canada often looked at, and we have had discussions over years to what extent Canada could adopt this kind of structure and service. And I should maybe just read to you when the official opposition critic for science and technology, Kennedy Stewart, moved Bill C-558 on December the 3rd. He was asking for a parliamentary science officer. On his website, he uses the word science watchdog. But when it comes to actually describing what it is, he does mention that one of the models would be POST. So I'm just curious what Canada could learn from I'm just looked up, we have 25 years of POST notes going back to 1989. There's probably a longer development to discuss. What can you tell us? What could we learn in Canada from the way POST has been created, has developed, is working now? What would you say is a few lessons learned?
Well, first of all, each country must make their own arrangements, and I'm very happy to describe our arrangements and indeed our imperfections, but it doesn't mean that I think it wouldn't be right to come here and advise on a system that I don't properly understand. You will make your own arrangements in Canada. I don't think POST is a watchdog, however. What POST does, as I said, it really is aimed at providing information and resource for MPs, so that if there is a debate in the House of Commons on advances in human fertilisation or nuclear power or whatever, there is some kind of basis of agreed fact and analysis for a lay audience. But that is their function, providing that kind of information and advice for MPs. I wouldn't call them a watchdog, but it's, of course, each individual country to decide what kind of powers they would want in those circumstances.
Any other comments on the lessons learned from those years?
I think perhaps one thing that's quite interesting, the POST is not very well known among the scientific community. But I'd really like to ask you a question, which is, how many of your members of the House of Commons are actually scientists? Because I can tell you in the UK there is one PhD scientist out of 630 odd members of Parliament. Therefore, one cannot assume an enormously high level of scientific knowledge among our members of Parliament.
Good, yeah. Let me just challenge you a little bit on that. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to discuss what we mean by science advice was precisely to get to that point. So if we maintain that people with education in engineering, medicine, or perhaps political science or cognitive science or maybe even administrative sciences, if they're all really scientists, then why do you end up with only one in the entire parliament?
So, but I mean by that one person who's actually been involved in scientific research. I don't know what the number with PhDs are, but perhaps David knows that.
It's about 70, just over 70 MPs who have studied science at university level. And that figure has been fairly constant for the last decade or more, out of 650 MPs.
Thank you. Bownes, would you like to comment on the issue?
I'm not really quite sure what to comment on the issue, but I do think I understand what you're saying, And I think that having an evidence-based approach to research is very valuable for informing policy. So I think it is the research process that's very useful. But for some things, you actually need the discipline knowledge as well to know whether a new discovery, what the potential of it is, and whether that's in data analysis and what your computer will and won't do, or whether it's in medicine and a new treatment for a disease, or whether it's in chemistry. You need the experts who really understand what's possible, along with those who understand how to get best evidence from research, and that will go beyond the disciplines. So
Okay.
I think it's a mixture.
Thank you.